Today is the anniversary of the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. Thousands of Americans died. That was the day that we entered the Second World War. It seems like a good time to consider the threats this country faces now, 79 years later. At the top of the list of threats anyone in Washington will tell you, and has, is Russia. Russia has penetrated our government. Russia threatens our democracy. Russia works tirelessly to subvert our economy and our way of life. Since the day Donald Trump was elected in 2016, they have told us this. Their endlessly complex, serialized collusion hoax dominated our public conversation for years. Of course, it was a lie, and we're all aware of that. Russia never had the power or the money to control our government, and there's no evidence they even tried. But that doesn't mean, and this is the key, that there was no collusion. In fact, there was collusion. Top leaders in American government and business have been compromised by a foreign power that seeks to undermine our country and our democratic system. It turns out that many of the very people who ranted so hysterically about Russia were, even as they were doing it, even as they were yelling about Vladimir Putin, in fact, they were doing precisely what they claimed to decry. They were working on behalf of a foreign power, our chief global rival, the government of China. The Russia hoax effectively was a diversion. It hid something that is not a hoax at all, but that is real and threatening to all of us. We're going to spend the foreseeable future reporting on the relationship between America's political and financial elites and the communist government of China that has made many of them very rich. But we want to start tonight with evidence, with a remarkable video. This video was recorded a little over a week ago, on November 28th. The man you're about to see speak is a professor from Beijing called Dongcheng. The video comes from an appearance that he made on a Chinese television show about Wall Street and international trade. Dongcheng works at Renmin University in Beijing. He is also, like so many in academia in China, a servant of his country's government. This video was deleted from Chinese social media soon after being uploaded, and there's a reason for that, as you'll see.
前边特朗普政府跟我们打贸易战。那么我们为什么搞不定特朗普政府？为什么以前1992年到2016年之间，中美之间各种问题都能搞得定？是不是？大家发现没有？所有的危机，不管是银河号事件，还是炸大使馆，还是撞了飞机，所有事情全部是床头吵架床尾和，2个月之内搞定。什么原因？这儿我抛出一个可能又要是暴论了，就是因为咱们上边有人，就是我们在美国的权势核心圈我们有我们的老朋友。
There's a lot of garbage floating around the internet right now, a lot of fake things. That video is real, and those subtitles are accurate. We checked today with 2 different Chinese speakers and confirmed that. What he just said, what you just read on the screen, tells the story. This is as close to a smoking gun as we have ever seen. Quote, we have people at the top of America's core inner circle of power and influence. According to the man you just saw, that has been true for decades. So who are these people, and how many of them work in our media and in our government? Well, he didn't say precisely. At one point in the video, he described a Chinese agent working as a vice president at, quote, a top Wall Street financial institution. I can't say more, he explained, without making political trouble. Dongcheng did tell his audience that one agent in particular was especially useful, and he goes on at some length about her. He describes her as an American who's lived abroad for many years, who is now a Chinese citizen. And this seems to baffle him a little bit. The Chinese government doesn't allow dual citizenship. Why would they? Why would anyone? Dongcheng seems pleased that the U.S. government is foolish enough to allow it. He explains that this American agent, who lives at least part of the year in Beijing, helped the Chinese government with a propaganda operation in the city of Washington in 2015. And he goes on to describe that in some detail. The Obama administration was easy to manipulate, he suggests. They helped. The Chinese had many friends among the Obama people. The problem came when Donald Trump was elected. After that, he says, everything changed.
是呢，就过去这个30年过去40年，我们在美国的他的这个利用他权势核心圈，是不是？我前面讲过，华尔街在1970年代开始对美国它的内政外交有非常强的影响力，所以我们有路径依赖，是吧？但问题是，08年之后，华尔街的地位下降了， 更重要的是，16年之后，华尔街搞不定特朗普，为什么？很尴尬。特朗普以前对华尔街有过一次软性违约，所以双方有矛盾啊。当然，这个细节我就不多说了，时间可能已经来不及了，是吧？那么，这个中美贸易战过程中，他们也试图帮忙啊。据我所知，美方的朋友跟我讲，这个试图帮忙，但是啊，力有不逮。
Since the 1970s, he said, and he's an economics professor, you should know, Wall Street has had enormous influence over the way the United States government operates, over American policy. The Chinese government, he says, has enormous influence on Wall Street. And that arrangement worked very well for a long time. Then Donald Trump unexpectedly was elected in 2016, and Wall Street was infuriated. Wall Street can't fix Trump, he said, but they tried. And this solves the mystery. If you're wondering why our political class has stood by and allowed the Chinese government to degrade this country and our way of life, why they've stood by as the Chinese government has flooded the United States with deadly opioids that have killed hundreds of thousands of people, or have stood by as the Chinese government ripped off billions in intellectual property from our companies, there's your answer. Earlier this year, the chairman of Harvard's chemistry department was arrested for taking $50,000 a month from the Communist Party of China in return for sending secrets and referring top scientists to Beijing. It barely rated as a scandal. You may not even be aware it happened. Why? Because so many are on the take, in effect. Donald Trump was an impediment to this very lucrative arrangement. And for that reason, Di Zhongsheng explains in the video, America's most powerful elites, and he calls them that, got to work on electing a new president. Again, read the words at the bottom of your screen as he speaks.
但现在呢？现在我们看到拜登上台了，传统的精英、政治精英啊，这个建制派，他们跟华尔街的关系是非常密切的。所以大家看到吧，拜登的儿子被特朗普说你在全球有什么基金公司，发现没有？谁帮他建的基金公司啊？明白吗？这里边都有买卖啊。那么，所以这个时候啊，这个时候我们。
Oh, Donald Trump, he notes, because the Chinese do pay close attention to what we say here, Donald Trump has complained about Hunter Biden and his ties to the Chinese government. Those are real, he just confirms. So now you know why you weren't allowed to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop, why big business aligned as one, the tech companies and the rest, to suppress that story, because they were implicated in it. Back in October, we interviewed a man called Tony Bobulinski. We interviewed him because no one else would. Tony Bobulinski was a business partner of the Bidens. Here's what he told us about China.
And in a document that you guys have, and I think it's been provided to to the world, the Chinese referenced that because of their trust in the Biden family, that Chairman Yi and Director Zhang are excited about moving forward in this. And in that document, they reference loaning $5 million to the BD family.
Right.
The BD family is the Biden family.
What are the implications of this going forward? If Joe Biden is elected president, which could very well happen, how does this constrain his ability to deal with China?
Are you asking for my personal opinion?
I'm asking for your opinion as someone who's worked with the Chinese.
So I think Joe Biden and the Biden family are compromised.
I think Joe Biden and the Biden family are compromised with China. Looks like he was right about that, and it looks like the Bidens are far from the only ones who've been compromised. Gordon Chang has been covering this story for an awfully long time. He's a senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute. He's the author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War. Earlier today, he vetted that video you just saw for us and confirmed it was real. We're happy about that. Gordon Chang joins us tonight. Gordon, thanks so much for coming on. To those of us who don't follow this full-time as you do and who don't speak Mandarin, this is a shocking admission of what's happening here. Tell us what you make of it.
There is incredible arrogance among the Chinese elites, and that's what I take away from this video. You know, there are a number of instances that Dee talks about, and I don't know if they're actually true or not, but the point is that this is what Chinese leaders think. And because they think that way, they're going to push a President Biden around. They're going to do things which are dangerous because we're going to have to push back. Under President Trump, the Chinese didn't try this because they were afraid of him. So what I'm concerned about is the state of mind of China. We see this from Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, all the way down to this guy, Di Dongsheng. This is dangerous.
So he's out there less than a month after our presidential election saying essentially, we admit it, we are in control. Our friends in the business community in the United States, Wall Street specifically, are on our side, over and against the U.S. government itself, the current presidential administration, and we pull the strings. Do you think that's bragging? To what extent is that true?
Well, that part of the video is true. What I was referring to was the politics and prose incident, which is very interesting. But in terms of the most important points that Dee makes, that's absolutely true, that China does have that relationship into what he calls the core circle of America's real power. And they used that during the Obama administration and prior administrations, and they couldn't do it during the Trump administration. That much we know. And I know that they are in anticipation licking their chops about what's going to happen from January 20 on.
It's just it's an amazing, amazing story. Were you surprised that he said this on camera in front of a live audience?
That actually took me by surprise because what he was making were those admissions, which really go to the core of the China-U.S. relationship. And I think that what President Trump can do, whether he has 40 days or 4 years, is to break some of those connections. He can do it with the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. He can even maybe use the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. But we've got to break those connections, because if we don't do that, we are going into a point where we may not be able to deter China because they are so arrogant, so belligerent, that they think that they can buy any American politician, including the President of the United States. And therefore, as I mentioned, they are going to be tempted to do something that cannot be unwound.
It cannot be unwound. Nicely put. Gordon Chang, I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
So last week in the Wall Street Journal, there was a kind of remarkable op-ed stating as clearly as anyone has ever stated the nature of the threat that we face from China. The op-ed was written by someone who would know, the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe. He called the Communist Party of China, quote, the greatest threat to democracy and freedom worldwide since World War II. It's an amazing piece, worth your time if you haven't read it. In just a moment, we'll have Director Ratcliffe on to discuss that. He wrote this, quote, the intelligence is clear. Beijing intends to dominate the United States and the rest of the planet economically, militarily, and technologically. I call its approach of economic espionage, rob, replicate, and replace. China robs U.S. companies of their intellectual property, replicates the technology, and then replaces the U.S. firms in the global marketplace. Now, those aren't simply legal disputes. They have actual consequences for millions of American workers, on our standard of living, on what your kids will do for a living. Ratcliffe noted that in 2018, a Chinese wind turbine manufacturer ripped off trade secrets from a Massachusetts-based infrastructure company called American Semiconductor. As a direct result of that theft, American Semiconductor lost over $1 billion in value and had to cut 700 jobs. Now, that didn't happen because the company, American Semiconductor, was careless. It happened because they were the victim of theft. That's happening everywhere, including in the Pentagon. According to Ratcliffe, quote, China also steals sensitive U.S. defense technology to fuel President Xi Jinping's aggressive plan to make China the world's foremost military power. U.S. intelligence shows that China has even conducted human testing on members of the People's Liberation Army in the hope of developing soldiers with biologically enhanced capabilities. There are no ethical boundaries to Beijing's pursuit of power. Remarkable. We know where this is leading, and Ratcliffe's op-ed spells it out. Quote, Beijing is preparing for an open-ended period of confrontation with the United States. Washington should also be prepared. Leaders must work across partisan divides to understand the threat, speak about it openly, and take action to address it. John Ratcliffe is the Director of National Intelligence, the man with more intelligence before him than anyone on the globe apart from the President. We're happy to have him on tonight. Director, thanks so much for coming on.
Tucker, good to see you.
You spell this out so clearly that it made me wonder why the rest of us, so many in our public life, haven't been saying this for quite some time. You make it sound obvious.
Well, I think you did a good job of encapsulating why, Tucker. There are a lot of people who, for economic reasons, don't want China to be our greatest threat. There are a lot of people who, for political reasons, don't want China to be our greatest threat in America. But the intelligence doesn't lie. China is our greatest threat, and it's not even close. No other country has the capability of essentially taking away the American dream and a specific plan to do so, and the intelligence is clear. So, Tucker, I wanted to use the unique vantage point that I have to make sure, as the Director of National Intelligence, my job is to warn the American people of threats, and there is no greater threat than China to America.
The most jarring part of the piece, I thought, was your description of the massive ramp-up of the Chinese military. And from your telling, not necessarily for defensive purposes. What do you think their aim is?
Well, again, dominate militarily, technologically, and economically. On the military front, they've already achieved having the largest Navy of any country in the world. From a military force standpoint, the People's Republic of China has a military of 2 million. They want them to be the largest, and they also want them to be the strongest, which is why they're engaged in what you referenced, which is called gene editing, literally trying to alter the DNA, experimenting on DNA to make soldiers, sailors, and airmen stronger and more powerful.
That's horrifying. Do you think Beijing anticipates some kind of physical confrontation with the United States in the next several years?
Well, here's the funny thing, Tucker, is China knows at this point that the United States is still the world superpower. They know they're catching us in all of those respects. They're banking on the fact that we're not going to do anything until they're superior in all those respects. Great generals always say it's better to fight downhill. Right now, the United States can fight downhill against China. We don't ever want to be in a position where we're looking up at China, and all of the plans that they have, all of the initiatives made in China, the Digital Silk Road, Belt and Road Initiative, those are all thin veneers and facades for which China is going around the world and essentially gaining the influence, power to become the world's superpower and supplant the United States in that role.
We heard a lot over the past 4 years about Russia's ability to break into John Podesta's Gmail account. To the extent you can, to the extent it's not classified, give us a sense of China's penetration into our networks, government networks.
Well, it's significant and growing every day. And Tucker, you made a great point in your opening about Russia. Listen, they are a dangerous adversary. I don't mean to minimize them, but you made the point correctly about economically. Russia can't compete the way China can. The largest economy in the world is the United States. The second largest is China. Russia's not in the top 10. Italy, Brazil, and the state of Texas have a larger economy than Russia. So as dangerous as Russia can be, they cannot compete with us the way China is. And China has a very specific plan to do that. And one of the ways that China has made their way to the top is they understand that information is the key to their dominance. So they're going to get there any way they possibly can. That's what subsidizing Huawei and ZTE is all about. Yeah. Those are Chinese companies that are run by the Chinese government. They know that they can steal more information if they run the telecommunications networks over which our information travels. That's one of the ways that China has gotten so good in terms of getting into our networks and into our information society.
We've been asleep. Thank you for helping to wake people up. John Ratcliffe, Director of National Intelligence.
Great to be with you, Tucker. Thanks.